The Romans were the most powerful and influential force in the ancient world and still have an impact on our society today. Their punishments are infamous to this day, and their laws and trials can be seen through the common law in British provinces around the world.
Status has always dictated crime and punishment. In Rome, you probably wouldn't see a senator on trial for petty theft, nor a slave on trial for treason. One's status in Rome affected every part of their life, including how they were viewed in their court. When a slave committed a crime, they were not given a trial. As merchandise of their owner, it was often for the master to decide their fate. Slaves' punishments were most often corporal, however not to the point of damaging the goods. Crimes committed by more common Romans were similar to today's crimes. Forgery was common and often punished by banishment, and blasphemy was also an offense in the eyes of the Roman court.
Punishment in Rome was brutal compared to today, but their society held the sanctity of life in a different light than ours. Cicero, a Roman orator and lawyer, said, "Silent enim leges inter arma." Laws are silent in times of war, and Rome was basically always in a time of war. Another intricacy of Roman court was that certain crimes held automatic sentences, one of the more interesting being the punishment for patricide. If one was convicted of patricide, they were projectio and plufontem, or thrown into the river.
The Romans held their punishments in a strict order based off severity of the crime, as follows. Fines, or damnum, were based off the nature of one's crime. Bonds, or vincula, imprisonment and fetters, which would be similar to modern jail with an extra helping of public shame. Stripes, verbera, would be beaten by rods. Retaliation, or talio, would be to suffer in the same manner at which one offended, and while it wasn't really a legal punishment, it was more vigilante justice performed by the paterfamilias.
Infamy, ignominia, or public shaming worked well for those trying to raise the political ranks of banishment, exilium, and slavery. Servitude acted as a punishment, as Roman citizenship was oftentimes more precious than currency, and finally death, which Romans are famous for. Crucifixion, crucifixus, is the most famous and cruelest form of execution in the Roman world. Roman citizens could not be sentenced to death unless treason was committed, and even then the Roman citizens could not be crucified.
The Romans developed several types of litigation throughout their empire. During the Republic, the dominating form of trials was the formulary process. The formulary process was much more democratic than trials would become under the rule of the emperors. It was also a lot stricter in its rules, process, and admittance of evidence. This process was mainly reserved for civil cases, specifically issues with calling in a severe debt, but it still covered severe criminal cases as well.
There were several steps in this trial. The nominatio was the first step for the litigants to nominate a judge, a praetor, for the trial. The intentio was a listing of the charges against the defendant. The commendantio was the listing of the appropriate punishment for the crime by the praetor. Someone forced to pay off their debt might have their property and status removed. Someone guilty of treason might be banished or killed. The demonstratio was the presentation of the prosecution's case. They had to explain the reason why this charge is being alleged. The acceptio is the defense's response. The prosecution has a rebuttal and the replicatio. The praescriptio was a clause stating that no other charge can be alleged against the defendant. Following these presentations, the judge would decide if the defendant was guilty or not and give the next steps in punishment if appropriate.
According to the Digesta in Justinian Code, the litigant on either side could stop the trial by swearing a sacred oath. Unlike swearing on the Bible before giving testimony today, the oath was a promise of the ultimate issue. If someone swore an oath, they would practically win.
During the empire, the Romans had trials under the cognito extra ordinem process. This process is much more absolute than the previous form. The magistrates would act as judge and control the debate and evidence that was entered in the trial. They also were the ones determining the result.
Roman law is still studied today and is one of the main influencers on the common law practice in the English court system. Its many forms and faults represent the freedom or lack of the government gave to its people.